Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where everything was going perfectly? The chemistry was there, the conversations were deep, the attraction felt mutual, and then suddenly, they pulled away. Texts got slower, energy shifted, plans became uncertain, and you were left thinking, what just happened? Here's the part no one tells you. Sometimes, when someone pulls away like that, it's not because they don't care, it's because they care too much. And that's where dark psychology enters the picture. Stay with me, because once you understand this pattern, you'll never panic the same way again. Before we dive deeper, a quick message. If you've been learning from my videos and you want to support this work, you can subscribe to me on Facebook with a paid membership, send stars, or join my YouTube channel's paid community. Your support helps me create more powerful content for you, and I truly appreciate every bit of it. All right, now let's continue. When emotional attachment starts forming, something interesting happens in the brain. Attachment activates vulnerability. Vulnerability activates fear, and fear activates defense mechanisms. Pulling away is one of the most common defenses. Let that sink in. The more real it feels, the more dangerous it feels to someone who isn't emotionally secure. Now here's the mini hook you need to hear. The timing of the pullback tells you everything. If someone pulls away right after intimacy increases, emotionally or physically, that's not random. That's attachment anxiety or avoidance getting triggered. There are 3 main reasons someone pulls away when they're attached. And the first one might surprise you. Fear of losing control. When feelings deepen, people lose emotional control. They start thinking about you more. They feel jealous unexpectedly. They feel vulnerable. For someone who values independence heavily, that loss of control feels threatening. So what do? They create distance to regain power. Distance equals emotional regulation, at least in their mind. But here's what makes this powerful. If they were indifferent, they wouldn't need distance. Indifference doesn't panic. Attachment does. Now let's go deeper. Have you noticed how some people pull away right after a deep conversation? You talk about childhood, dreams, trauma, future plans, and the next day, they're colder. That's not coincidence. Intimacy accelerates attachment. An accelerated attachment scares people who aren't used to emotional depth, so they retreat. Not because the connection was weak, because it was strong, and strength overwhelmed them. Here's something most people misinterpret. They think, if they cared, they'd move closer. Not always. Secure people move closer. Avoidant or fearful people move backward first. Attachment style matters, especially in modern dating culture in places like the US, UK, and Canada, where emotional independence is heavily glorified. People want connection, but they're terrified of dependency. And when attachment starts forming, their nervous system goes into self-protection mode. Pull back, slow down, create space. It feels safer there. Now here's the dark psychology twist. When someone pulls away after things intensify, they often expect you to chase, not because they're manipulative, but because distance tests security. They subconsciously want to know, will you panic? Will you overreact? Will you disappear? Your reaction determines the power dynamic. If you chase aggressively, you confirm their fear of engulfment. If you withdraw completely in anger, you confirm their fear of abandonment. But if you remain calm and grounded, you become emotionally rare, and rarity increases attachment. Let me tell you something even deeper. Sometimes pulling away is a subconscious loyalty test. When attachment grows, risk grows. Risk of heartbreak, risk of rejection, risk of losing autonomy. So they pull away to see, will this person stay stable? Not clingy, not dramatic, stable. Because stability feels safe, and safety deepens attachment. Now I want you to think carefully. When they pulled away, did they fully disappear? Or did they linger? Did they still watch your stories? Like your posts? Send random check-ins? That's not detachment. That's conflicted attachment. A fully uninterested person detaches cleanly. A conflicted attached person creates inconsistent distance. Hot and cold behavior is rarely about boredom. It's usually about emotional confusion. Here's another pattern. They pull away when they feel themselves falling faster than you. Yes, Sometimes distance is used to slow down feelings. If they sense they're becoming more invested, they may instinctively reduce communication to regain emotional balance. It's like pressing the brakes, not because they want to stop the car, but because it's moving too fast. But let's be clear about something important. Not all pulling away means attachment. Sometimes people genuinely lose interest. So how do you tell the difference? Watch consistency before the pullback. Was the connection steady? Were they investing, opening up, planning ahead? If yes, and then suddenly distance appears after closeness increased, attachment is likely involved. If the investment was weak from the beginning, that's not attachment. That's fading interest. Timing reveals motive, always. Now here's the part most people mess up. When someone pulls away, they react emotionally. They send long messages. They demand explanations. They overanalyze. And in doing so, they increase pressure. Pressure triggers more avoidance. It becomes a cycle. But if you respond with controlled energy, if you maintain your pace, if you don't collapse into insecurity, you shift the dynamic. Because when someone tests distance and you remain steady, they feel the pull back toward you. Silence creates curiosity. Stability creates attraction. Emotional self-control creates respect. There's something psychologically powerful about not chasing immediately. It signals abundance. It signals self-worth. And most importantly, it signals emotional regulation. People are drawn toward those who regulate well, because regulation equals safety, and attachment deepens around safety. Let me reveal something subtle. When someone pulls away but doesn't fully detach, they are often internally battling, "I want this," versus "I'm scared of this." That internal war creates inconsistent behavior. And if you understand that, you stop personalizing it. It's not always about your value. It's often about their capacity. And capacity is shaped by past wounds. Now here's the uncomfortable truth. If someone pulls away and you instantly feel panic, that reveals your attachment pattern too. Because emotionally secure individuals don't collapse under temporary distance. They observe. They adjust. They don't beg. They don't chase. They don't threaten. They stay grounded. And grounded energy often reactivates attachment in the other person. Let's talk about power for a moment. Pulling away can shift power temporarily, but emotional control determines who keeps it. If they distance and you implode, they unconsciously feel validated in their avoidance. If they distance and you remain calm, they start wondering. They start missing. They start reevaluating. Distance creates clarity for both sides. Here's a final layer that changes everything. When someone pulls away because they're attached, they often come back softer, more intentional, more aware, because distance forces emotional processing. But they only come back if the space felt safe. If the space felt dramatic or hostile, they stay away. So your reaction writes the next chapter. Now let's go even further, because understanding why they pull away is only half the equation. The other half is understanding what happens inside you during that distance. When someone you're emotionally invested in creates space, your nervous system responds, not rationally, emotionally. You start scanning for evidence. You replay conversations looking for signs you missed. You question your worth. You wonder what you did wrong. And here's where most people make their biggest mistake. They let that internal spiral become external behavior. They reach out too much. They double text. They seek reassurance in ways that push the other person further away. That behavior isn't weak, it's human. But it's also the exact thing that breaks the dynamic. Because the moment you externalize your anxiety, you hand over your emotional power. And in the psychology of attraction, emotional power matters. Not in a manipulative way, but in an energetic way. People are drawn to those who feel whole without them, and repelled by those who feel incomplete without them. That's not harsh. That's just how emotional systems work. So the work during the distance isn't about them. It's about you. It's about catching yourself in the spiral and redirecting. Not suppressing, redirecting. Feel the discomfort, acknowledge it, and then consciously choose how you respond. That choice is where your power lives. There's a concept in psychology called the anxious avoidant trap. Here's how it works. One person has an anxious attachment style. They want closeness. They crave reassurance. When distance appears, they move toward it aggressively. The other person has an avoidant attachment style. They want connection, but feel suffocated by too much closeness. When pressure increases, they pull back. What happens when these two styles collide? The anxious person chases. The avoidant person retreats, which makes the anxious person chase harder, which makes the avoidant person retreat further. It becomes a loop. Neither person is wrong. Both people are operating from their nervous system's learned patterns, but the loop destroys connection. And the only way to break it is for the anxious person to stop chasing. Because when the avoidant suddenly feels no pressure, something shifts. The threat of engulfment lifts, and curiosity replaces fear. This is why emotional regulation isn't just self-improvement advice, it's a relationship strategy. Let's talk about what actually fills the space when you create it correctly. When you pull back with intention, not out of anger, but out of self-awareness, something interesting starts to happen on the other side. They notice the shift in your energy. They expect you to chase. You don't. They expect you to text again. You don't. And that gap creates cognitive dissonance. Because people form attachment through unpredictability and anticipation. When you remove the predictable pursuit, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability is magnetic. Not because games work long-term, but because it gives the other person space to feel their own longing. You can't miss someone who won't let you breathe. Distance is what creates the longing that pulls people back. Here's something no one talks about. When two people are in a dynamic where one keeps pulling away and the other keeps chasing, they're both avoiding something. The avoidant is avoiding vulnerability. The anxious chaser is avoiding being alone with their feelings. Chasing is a distraction from internal discomfort. It feels productive, like you're doing something, but it's actually avoidance dressed up as effort. Real emotional work happens inside, in stillness, in the discomfort of not knowing. And when you can sit in that discomfort without collapsing, you become a fundamentally different presence to the people around you. You become someone who can be trusted, because you showed yourself you can handle uncertainty. And that kind of inner stability radiates outward. People feel it, even when they can't explain why they feel more drawn to you. One more thing before we wrap this up. There's a difference between someone pulling away because they're attached and someone pulling away because they're done. Learning to tell the difference protects you. The attached person who pulls away will show inconsistency, hot then cold, present then distant, still engage in small ways, a like, a view, a reply, come back after the distance, softer, more intentional. The person who is done will gradually fade with no bursts of warmth, stop engaging entirely. No stories, no likes, no check-ins. Feel emotionally flat when they do communicate. One pattern is about fear. The other is about conclusion. Both deserve your discernment because your energy is finite, and investing it in someone who has already emotionally exited is a cost you don't need to pay. Know the difference. Trust your observations over your hopes. So remember this, pulling away is not always rejection. Sometimes it's emotional overload. Sometimes it's fear of intimacy. Sometimes it's attachment activating defense. Watch patterns, watch timing, watch behavior consistency, and most importantly, control your response. Because in modern dating, the person who regulates emotions best wins. And winning here doesn't mean domination. It means clarity. It means self-respect. It means not losing yourself in someone else's emotional confusion. You become the calm in someone else's storm. And that kind of presence, it's rare. And rare things are always worth more. If this perspective shifted something in you, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. We break down emotional psychology, attachment patterns, and modern dating dynamics in ways most people never talk about. And if you want to understand mixed signals, emotional detachment, and attraction psychology even deeper, check out the other videos on this channel. The more you understand the patterns, the less confused you'll feel, and the more powerful your presence becomes. I'll see you in the next one.